The UK is a pretty good place. The people are nice and there's a lot of good pubs. But it's not perfect. In fact, I decided to list the top 10 things that Sweden does better than the UK. Strap in, lads, this is gonna be a bumpy ride. The UK has a lot of people, and all of these people have places to be and things to do, and that means that they need to get around somehow. The London Underground is an amazing feat of engineering, especially considering when it was built. And the UK train system is well built out with a lot of coverage. And who doesn't like the classic double-decker buses? But public transport in the UK is a bit of a chore compared to the smooth public transport options in Sweden. Sweden has efficient commuter trains, subways and trams, as well as an extensive bus network. You can ride trains all over the country, and there are plenty of sleeper trains if you want to get to the inaccessible and frigid north. Now, don't get me wrong, the Swedish trains are a joke. There's frequent cancellations and delays, and the commuter trains stop running as soon as the first snow falls. But somehow, it's still better than public transport in the UK. The underground lines are frequently closed, and the trains are insanely expensive. And they're possibly even more unreliable than trains in Sweden. Sweden might have severe problems with public transport, but at least we're better than the UK. Have you ever worked with a British company? They're often filled with very nice and skilled people, but they're also filled with arrogant pricks who think that they're special because they have a title like assistant to the regional manager or something like that. The UK firmly believes in work hierarchies and in top-down decision-making. This is an attitude that belongs in the Stone Age, or possibly in China or the US. Sweden has a very flat hierarchy, and workers are encouraged to take personal responsibility and to make decisions themselves whenever possible. This leads to a more pleasant work culture, to happier and more efficient workers, and it's easier to get things done. The Swedish consensus culture is often made fun of, by myself included, but a Swedish company with empowered employees can be extremely fast. And that's something you won't see in the UK, because everyone has to ask permission from the boss first. Did you know that Sweden actually had a bit of an empire a few hundred years ago? You didn't know that? That might be because we don't really talk about it all that much. Unlike some countries, we've pretty much gotten over our past glory days. The UK is a great nation with a huge economy and a lot of cultural influence, but it's far from the British Empire that it once was. The days of Britain being the empire where the sun doesn't set are long past, and they don't control 25% of the world's landmass any longer. It's time to start living in the now instead. And that's something Sweden does better than the UK. We've gotten over our past. It's raining in London. What a shocker, right? You're probably not gonna believe what I'm about to say next, but Sweden actually has a better climate than the UK. I know, I'm always complaining about the weather in Sweden, but after looking up some statistics, I'm actually happy that I'm not living in the UK instead. The average number of sunshine hours per day is 3.8 in the UK, compared with 5.1 in Sweden. But weather isn't all about sunshine. What about rain? Well, the UK has 12.7 rain days on average, compared with 9.5 in Sweden. It does make sense after all. A sunny day in England is as rare as an extroverted Swede. Basically on par with leprechauns and unicorns. A sundial, that would be useful if there was ever any sun in London. I've heard about the famously miserable British weather, but I didn't really suspect that it was this bad. It's even worse than Sweden. I pity you people from the UK. Here's a bonus one. Swedish hotels are definitely better than the ones in the UK. Everything looks like it's from the 1970s. And what's with the faucets with two handles? You know, you can actually mix hot and cold water to get a good temperature. They did make an attempt in the shower, but that one is just insane instead. It pulsates between scalding and freezing every 5 seconds or so. UK hotels? Nope, no thank you very much. I'll stick to my Swedish ones if I can. Let's talk about equality. Sweden has a score of 82.3 on the World Population Review Gender Equality Index of 2021. The UK, they're way down there with 77.5%. It's not a bad score, it's not too shabby, but Ireland is at 80% and Namibia is at 80.9%. And the US, in comparison, is at 76.3%, so the UK had better step up a bit. It's not a surprise that Sweden scores high on gender equality. All of the Nordics are really high up, with Iceland topping the charts at 89.2%. So that's one more thing that Sweden does better than the UK. Even though Iceland, Norway, Finland and New Zealand are all even better than Sweden. If you live in Sweden, you can expect a pretty long life. The average life expectancy is 83.7 years. Sweden is in place 12 according to the Worldometer site, beaten by countries such as Japan and Italy. That site also lists Macau and Hong Kong as separate countries, by the way. I hope no one tells China. So where's the UK at? Way down at place 30, with an average life expectancy of 82.3 years. The UK is worse off than Sweden, but at least they're not down there with Chad and Nigeria, with an average life expectancy of less than 54 years. I guess that people in Northern Europe are preserved by the cold or something like that. I know that it's not nice to pick on someone smaller, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Another thing I wanna bring up is that Sweden is bigger than the UK. The UK is of a respectable size, 243,610 square kilometers. That's roughly 45,524,240 football fields. That's American football fields and not proper football fields. And I have no idea why I decided to include that metric for comparison. Sweden, on the other hand, is 450,295 square kilometers, almost double the size of the UK. Sweden is actually the 5th biggest country in Europe, and we have vast forests and mountains and lakes. The UK, some hills and a bit of farmland, and I guess that's it. But I guess that I shouldn't blow my own horn too much. If you look at the population instead, Sweden has around 11 million people, while the UK has 67 million. So the UK has more than 6 times as many people squeezed in on roughly half the size of the land. It's no wonder that I feel that London is a huge city compared to little old Stockholm. Good initiative with this wildflower meadow, but it's not exactly a huge sprawling meadow, is it? And I love the British attention to detail. This wildflower meadow. What else is Sweden doing better than the UK? Let me think. How about not deciding to leave the EU? It's estimated that the average Londoner has lost 3,400 British pounds in 2023 as a result of Brexit. And it's also estimated that there were 2 million fewer jobs in the UK in 2023 due to Brexit. And the British economy is roughly 140 billion pounds smaller because of Brexit. Now, Sweden is famous for making some really stupid decisions now and then. And we've really stirred up a hornet's nest with various sensitive topics in recent years, more than once. But not even Sweden has done something as stupid as leaving the EU. Not yet, at least. Before my next point, I really have to mention a caveat. A really big caveat. I have to strongly point out that I'm the exception to the rule when it comes to this next thing. This is what others are saying about Sweden. I'm not saying this about myself. So without further ado, the next thing that Sweden does better than the UK is looks and style. I know, it's ridiculous that I'm saying that while looking like a sloppy camel myself, but that's what visitors to Sweden say. They're surprised at how beautiful and how well-dressed Swedes are. We've all heard the stereotypes about gorgeous Swedish girls, but this is true for all genders. Or lack thereof. You can say a lot of good things about the Britons, but calling them well-dressed, that would be a complete and utter lie. For my final item in this list, what do you think I'm gonna mention that Sweden does better than the UK? What Sweden brought to the world to make it a better place for everyone? There's one invention that makes every other Swedish or British invention pale in comparison. I'm of course talking about Swedish fika. Swedish fika is a staple of Swedish culture. It's not just a coffee, it's a concept. It's a state of mind. Fika is often a social event. It's not really about the coffee or the pastry. It's about a connection. But it can also be a solitary experience. If I'm having a pastry by myself, I still call it fika. It's a time to relax and reflect. Sure, other countries have coffee breaks, and tea time is of course common in the UK. You also have other stuff like afternoon tea, but none of that is the same as the marvel that is Swedish fika. So I think that fika is a worthy first place in the list of things that Sweden does better than the UK. Now I'm gonna have a beer, which is also a kind of fika by the way. And you should like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day. While I'm sipping my beer, you should have a look at this video up here in the corner.